I'm Dennis Sullivan. I'm a percussionist and composer. I will be performing at the Resonant Bodies Festival on Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Be beginning with a piece by a German composer based in Hamburg, Alexander Schubert, called Your Fox is a Dirty Gold, for a solo performer and motion sensors using these guys right here, these little Nintendo Wii remote. Essentially, what he's done is he removes the sensor from the nunchuck here and dips it in this pretty slick plastic coat. Then the Wii remote is attached to the body. The sensor is put on the wrist, a long sleeve shirt or something over top of that to hide all the wires and enhance the mystery. This is for solo voice and the motion controlled electronics. Some of it is pre-recorded material, and then there's also an electric guitar. This is an electric guitar. That's what that is. That acts purely as a trigger to tell the Max MSP patch to move on from one event to the next. I'll also be performing Le Corps à Corps by Georges Apergis, solo voice and zarb. Zarb is an Iranian goblet-shaped hand drum, traditional hand drum. The voice is probably equally as prominent as the zarb. It's where the piece is kind of an exploration between the voice and the drum, kind of trying to find a common language. Instrumental music can kind of drift into the vocal role, be it sometimes like playing along with your words, what we call speech rhythm, so you just kind of play along with what you're saying. I'll be ending with a piece of my own that I just finished in March. That was about 4 years or so in the making, kind of on and off, called Sky Cycle Variations. And this is for pre-recorded electronics, vibraphone, tie gongs, and voice. Sky Cycle Variations being the title because I use a text poet and hip-hop artist based in Providence, Rhode Island, from Strange Famous Records, named B. Dolan, and he has a spoken word piece called Sky Cycle Blues, which is all about the rise and fall and demise of Evel Knievel. I've been writing for about 4 years, but it really wasn't until this past year, actually, that I started performing the pieces a lot. I guess I just felt like I hadn't really found the voice I was looking for yet. But this past year, premiered 3 pieces, a trio for percussion, electronics, and tenor saxophone called Grind, Strangle, Thump, which was mostly an instrumental piece, but there's a large kind of theatrical section in the middle. And then I had a quartet, percussion quartet, for speaking and singing percussion quartet. My duo partner in Radical 2, Olivia Lorenzo, who had been doing some theater work with me for a while, so has a bit of experience. And then 2 guys from Ictus Percussion, Josh Perry and Chris Graham. And that piece also used texts by B. Dolan and his label mate, Sage Francis, whose words I've just kind of fallen in love with. And then this piece, Sky Cycle Variations, whereas the other 2 pieces kind of work with chopping up multiple different texts. Sky Cycle Variations is really just using this one text following the life and rise and immediate fall from grace of Evel Knievel, who I found just this really fascinating figure, and somebody I think anybody that has an almost over-the-top level of dedication to their craft can relate to the text. I mean, this is a very extreme case, but he kind of sacrificed everything in his life to keep jumping over trucks or canyons or rivers. You know, he really like broke every single bone in his body practically. And, you know, I think by the end he had to be helped onto his motorcycle. He felt this really intense obligation to the world and to his country to kind of be this person that everybody needed him to be. In a way, kind of like outlived the persona he created. He went from this like national hero to kind of a novelty. That says in the text is said, living to see yourself shrink to the size of a footnote. I think a lot of artists have that fear, especially with the rapidly developing technology. You know, I was just at NIME. There was these things called Mimu gloves that, God, had like microphones, people using like the Xbox Kinect system. They have muscle sensors now. All these advancements in technology, you know, there is this kind of like, you want to keep up with it, but there is this fear that at some point, you know, do you become obsolete? I was in my undergraduate at the Hart School. So I found a score by Baltimore composer Stuart Saunders Smith called And Points North at the Hart School Library, and I was just completely fascinated about it. And it was, at the time, I was like 18 years old, and it was way over my head. And, the percussion writing was all, bizarre subdivisions and 5s and 7s and 9s over 11 inside of 13. At the time, I had no idea what I was looking at. But I just kept looking at the words. Particularly the end of the piece ends with like leaving the stage, walking on this like trail of dead leaves and sticks with these little bird calls. Each of 3 movements is like the heart in search of the spirit. And so the first movement is all metallic percussion and reciting a bit of text. And so it's the heart in search of the city. And then the second movement is playing on this large potted tree with wind chimes. I just like stared at the score in the library for like 4 years before I ever played it. So that was, I guess, when I first started thinking about getting involved in theater and using, my voice a little bit more. I'm going to give a shout out to somebody, and I hope he watches this at some point. Russell Podgorczyk, who was a composer at Hart when I was there, a graduate student when I was an undergraduate student, I believe, who's now in Austin, Texas, who wrote the most insane vocally driven pieces. And he was a violist and composer, but he had this ridiculous voice, and he could do like unbelievable things with his voice. I think I actually probably have him to thank for bringing me out of my shell from a vocal standpoint. So Russ, it's your fault, dude. You did this to me. 75 to 80% of the solo repertoire I think I've played at this point has been some kind of theatrical piece, either physical theater or vocal theater. Any other influences? Mike Patton. He became famous as the lead singer of the band Faith No More. He started putting out these like solo voice albums on his own label, and he's got a piece, Moonchild, that John Zorn wrote for him. High-pitched multiphonic screaming. There's like 6 or 7 notes going on, and he can just hold it forever. And like, I don't know, I was a big metalhead when I was a kid, and have actually in the last couple of years had this like underground metal renaissance. And there's a group called Cattle Decapitation, a vegan grindcore band from Southern California, from San Diego, I believe. And their vocalist, Travis Ryan, is a madman. Really, within one tune, he's got 7 or 8 different characters that are just completely different. And just the things he does with his voice and just the control he has over some of this, like, I guess, a very high-pitched, like, borderline multiphonic screaming that he can hold for what seems to be like 30 or 40 seconds at a time. I'm influenced by the techniques of those kinds of folks, and as well, I think, influenced by their attitude. Really, really uncompromising. For the Resonant Bodies set, because it was the first time anybody asked me to program a set specifically as a vocalist, which I thought of a more like kind of personal timeline thing for me of what brought me to that point. And so La Cora Cora was one of probably the first like truly advanced piece of theater percussion that I played, working with music like Apergis, Globokar, Alexander Schubert's music, Kagel, has all led me to this point of composing my own music, especially because there's not a lot of theater percussion out there that is equally challenging in the vocal and physical theater realm as it is in the percussion realm. But I guess it's why, and maybe this comes from this old punk rock kind of DIY attitude of I'm just going to do it myself. And I'm just going to write my own stuff. Super stoked to present this set at Resonant Bodies, and hope to see you.